Oh, wait a minute! Somebody in a hood attacking Breaker! And what the hell is this? And a kick? You mean who the hell is this?
There are moments in professional wrestling that transcend the typical weekly programming. Moments that become etched into the collective memory of every fan who witnesses them. Monday Night Raw delivered one of those moments. A revelation so shocking, so perfectly executed, so emotionally devastating that it will be discussed and dissected for years to come. What unfolded was not just another segment or another storyline beat. It was a masterclass in suspense, storytelling, and the kind of raw, visceral drama that reminds us why we fell in love with wrestling in the first place. The mystery had been consuming the WWE universe for weeks, gnawing at the edges of every conversation, dominating every social media thread, fueling countless theories and speculation. Who was behind the mask? Who had targeted Bron Breakker with such calculated malice? The Royal Rumble had been the scene of a vicious, unprovoked attack that left Breakker blindsided and humiliated, ambushed by a figure whose identity remained frustratingly concealed behind a simple black mask. That attack had set off a chain reaction of paranoia, rage, and destruction that transformed one of WWE's most dominant athletes into something far more dangerous and unpredictable. Bron Breakker had been on an absolute tear in the weeks following the Royal Rumble, but it wasn't the controlled dominance that had characterized his rise through WWE's ranks. This was something different, something darker, something that felt genuinely unhinged. He had been attacking anyone who looked at him wrong, destroying everything in his path, cutting promos that veered between seething anger and barely contained hysteria. The usually focused and athletic powerhouse had become a walking powder keg, ready to explode at the slightest provocation. Every week, fans wondered if this would be the episode where the mystery would finally be solved, where the masked attacker would be revealed, where Bron Breakker would finally get the answers he so desperately sought. The arena was absolutely electric as Monday Night Raw went live. You could feel the anticipation crackling through the air like static electricity, thousands of voices merging into a constant hum of excitement and expectation. The crowd knew something significant was going to happen. You could see it in their faces, hear it in their chants, sense it in the way they reacted to every entrance, every segment, waiting for that one moment that would make the entire night unforgettable. Wrestling fans have an instinct for these things, a collective sixth sense that tells them when they're about to witness something special. The show had been building toward something all night. Every segment felt like it was holding its breath. Every match seemed like it was merely filling time before the main event, the real story, the moment everyone had been waiting for. Backstage interviews with various wrestlers all circled around the same topic. Who was the masked attacker? Theories were thrown around with increasing desperation. Some suggested it was a returning legend settling an old score. Others believed it was a jealous competitor trying to derail Breakker's momentum. A few even speculated it might be someone from Bron's own family, turning the situation into a deeply personal betrayal. Bron Breakker himself had been a ghost for most of the evening, conspicuously absent from the backstage area, not appearing in any segments. His presence felt only through the constant discussion of his situation. This absence only added to the tension, creating a sense that when he finally did appear, something monumental was going to happen. The production team was playing the audience perfectly, building anticipation through absence, making everyone lean forward in their seats, checking the clock, wondering when the revelation would finally come. Then, about midway through the second hour, the arena lights dimmed. The crowd's volume increased immediately, a Pavlovian response to the lighting change that signals something important is about to occur. On the massive screen above the entrance ramp, a video package began to play. It showed everything. The original attack at the Royal Rumble in brutal detail, slow-motion replays of the masked figure striking from behind, the chaos that ensued, Bron Breakker's face contorted in pain and confusion. Then it showed the aftermath, the weeks of destruction, the interviews where Breakker promised vengeance, the near misses and false leads that had kept everyone guessing. The video package was masterfully edited, each clip chosen to maximize emotional impact, the music swelling at exactly the right moments, the pacing building toward an inevitable climax. You could hear the crowd's reactions shifting as the package played, gasps at the violence, murmurs at the clues they might have missed, a building crescendo of noise as the video approached its conclusion. The final image froze on Bron Breakker's face, eyes wild with rage, and then the screen went black. For a moment, there was complete silence. The arena held its collective breath. Then, shattering the quiet, Bron Breakker's entrance music exploded through the sound system at maximum volume. The crowd erupted, their response so loud it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Breakker emerged through the curtain, and immediately you could see he was different. This wasn't the calculated, athletic competitor WWE had showcased for months. This was someone who looked like they hadn't slept in days, whose eyes held a wildness that suggested they were operating on pure adrenaline and rage. He stormed down the entrance ramp with frightening intensity, his movements sharp and aggressive, every step purposeful and filled with barely contained violence. He didn't acknowledge the crowd, didn't play to the cameras, didn't do any of the typical entrance theatrics. He simply charged toward the ring with single-minded determination, sliding under the bottom rope and immediately calling for a microphone. A ringside crew member scrambled to provide one, practically throwing it into the ring before backing away, clearly intimidated by Breakker's demeanor. Bron Breakker paced the ring like a caged animal, his free hand clenching and unclenching into a fist, his jaw tight with tension. When he finally raised the microphone to speak, his voice was raw with emotion, each word delivered with an intensity that made it clear this wasn't scripted banter. This was something real, something that came from a deep, dark place. He talked about the attack at the Royal Rumble, describing in vivid detail how it felt to be blindsided, to be made to look weak, to have someone dare to target him when his guard was down. His voice rose and fell with emotion, sometimes shouting, sometimes dropping to an almost whisper, the contrast making every word hit harder. He spoke about the sleepless nights, the constant paranoia, the way he'd been looking over his shoulder for weeks, unable to trust anyone, unable to rest until he knew who had dared to attack him. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word, the kind of silence that only occurs when an audience is genuinely captivated. Breakker continued, his promo becoming more intense, more personal, more raw. He talked about how he'd been systematically going through the roster, eliminating suspects, sending messages, making it clear that when he found the attacker, the retribution would be absolute and merciless. He described the destruction he'd caused, almost taking pride in it, explaining that every person he'd attacked, everything he'd destroyed, was a step toward finding the truth. Then his tone shifted. The anger gave way to something else, something that sounded almost like pain, vulnerability creeping into his voice. He admitted that the not knowing was driving him insane, that the uncertainty was worse than any physical beating, that he needed closure, needed to look his attacker in the eye and understand why. This vulnerability made the moment even more powerful, showing that beneath the rage and destruction was someone genuinely hurt by the betrayal of being attacked when they thought they were safe. Breakker stopped pacing and stood in the center of the ring, microphone still raised, his chest heaving with emotion. He issued an ultimatum to the masked attacker, demanding they come out right now, demanding they face him like a man instead of hiding like a coward. His voice echoed through the arena, the challenge hanging in the air, everyone wondering if the attacker would actually appear, if this was finally the moment of truth. The seconds ticked by in agonizing slowness. Breakker's eyes were locked on the entrance ramp, his entire body tensed and ready to explode into action at the slightest movement. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, phones raised to capture what might happen next, a low murmur of anticipation building with each passing second. The commentators were speaking in hushed, urgent tones, speculating about whether the attacker would actually show, questioning if Breakker was prepared for whatever revelation was about to come. Then the lights went out completely. The arena plunged into absolute darkness, the kind of darkness that's disorienting and almost frightening when you're in a crowd of thousands. Screams and gasps filled the void where sight used to be, the crowd's excitement and nervousness manifesting in sound. Then a single spotlight illuminated, not the entrance ramp as expected, but one of the audience sections high in the arena. Standing there, Bathed in the harsh white light was the masked figure. The attacker had been in the crowd all along, watching, waiting, choosing this exact moment to reveal their presence. The crowd around the figure scrambled away, creating a circle of empty seats, everyone desperate to both get away from and get a better look at the mysterious individual. The figure stood completely still, a study in eerie calm while chaos erupted around them. Bron Breaker's head snapped toward the spotlight, his body immediately orienting toward his target. Even from across the arena, you could see his muscles tensing, could sense him preparing to launch himself through the crowd to get his hands on the attacker. But before he could move, the lights came back on, all of them, flooding the arena with illumination. And that's when everything changed. The masked figure began walking down the arena steps toward the barricade, moving with deliberate slowness, in no apparent hurry despite the violent reception they were clearly about to receive. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea, everyone simultaneously wanting to see what was about to happen, while also maintaining a safe distance from what promised to be an explosive confrontation. Camera operators scrambled to get into position, following the figure's descent, cutting between shots of them and reaction shots of Bron Breakker in the ring. Breakker had positioned himself near the ropes closest to where the attacker was approaching, his hands gripping the top rope so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He was shouting at the figure, demanding they hurry up, demanding they remove the mask, his voice raw and desperate with the need for answers. Security personnel appeared at ringside, clearly unsure whether they should be preparing to separate a fight or letting this play out, their uncertainty adding to the chaotic energy of the moment. The masked figure reached the barricade and smoothly vaulted over it, landing on the ringside floor with practiced ease. This simple athletic movement told a story. This wasn't just some random attacker, this was someone with training, someone who knew how to move in this environment. They walked toward the ring with that same measured pace, each step building tension, the anticipation becoming almost unbearable as they approached the ring steps. Bron Breakker backed up slightly, giving the attacker room to enter the ring, though his body language made it clear this retreat was strategic rather than fearful. He wanted them in the ring, wanted them trapped in that squared circle where there would be nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, just the two of them and whatever violent resolution was about to unfold. The attacker climbed the steps slowly, stepped through the ropes, and finally stood in the ring, separated from Breakker by maybe 10 feet of canvas. The two figures stared at each other across that distance, the moment stretching out, the entire arena seeming to hold its breath. The masked figure was slightly shorter than Breakker, with a lean, athletic build that suggested speed and agility rather than raw power. They wore all black, the mask simple and featureless except for eye holes, giving them an almost inhuman quality that had made them so unsettling throughout this entire storyline. Bron Breakker raised the microphone one more time, his voice shaking with barely controlled emotion. He gave one final demand for the attacker to remove the mask, to reveal themselves, to finally end this mystery that had consumed his life for weeks. The attacker remained still for a moment longer, then slowly, deliberately, raised their hands to the bottom of the mask. The arena noise was deafening now, everyone on their feet, everyone screaming, the anticipation reaching a fever pitch that seemed unsustainable. Cameras zoomed in tight on the attacker's hands as they gripped the mask, on Bron Breakker's face as he waited for the revelation, cutting between the two figures to maximize the drama of the moment. The attacker paused one more time, extending the moment to its absolute breaking point, and then pulled the mask off in one smooth motion. The face that was revealed sent shockwaves through the entire arena. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of screams, gasps, and complete stunned silence from those too shocked to make any sound at all. Bron Breakker's expression transformed from rage to confusion to absolute devastation in the span of seconds. The attacker's identity wasn't just surprising. It was personally, emotionally destructive in a way that no one had anticipated. It was someone from Bron's past, someone he had trusted implicitly, someone whose betrayal cut deeper than any physical attack ever could. The cameras captured every nuance of Breakker's reaction as the reality of who had attacked him sank in. His face went through a rapid succession of emotions: shock, denial, hurt, confusion, and finally a rage so pure and all-consuming that it was genuinely frightening to witness. The revealed attacker stood there, expression unreadable, not showing remorse or satisfaction or anger, just a cold, distant look that suggested this had all been calculated, that every moment of Bron's suffering had been intentional and planned. They made no move to explain themselves, offered no words of justification or apology, simply stood there and let their identity speak for itself. Bron Breakker dropped the microphone, the sound of it hitting the canvas amplified through the arena speakers, breaking the moment of stunned silence. Then he moved, launching himself across the ring with explosive speed, every ounce of his considerable athletic ability focused on reaching the person who had betrayed him. But the attacker was ready, had been expecting this response, and moved with fluid grace to avoid the initial assault. What followed was absolute chaos. These two individuals began brawling with a ferocity that went beyond typical wrestling violence. This felt personal, felt real, felt like two people with genuine animosity trying to hurt each other. They traded blows that echoed through the arena, each impact sounding sickening and brutal. The attacker, now unmasked, showed fighting skills that caught many by surprise, holding their own against Bron Breakker's power and rage, using technical skill and speed to counter his strength advantage. They crashed into the ropes, rebounded across the ring, went down to the mat in a tangle of limbs, each trying to gain the upper hand. Referees poured into the ring, trying to separate them, but were tossed aside like ragdolls. Security personnel followed, a half-dozen large men attempting to create a barrier between the two fighters, but even their combined efforts barely slowed the violence. Bron Breakker managed to get his hands on the attacker, lifting them up and delivering a devastating power slam that shook the entire ring structure. But before he could follow up, security finally managed to grab him, multiple men hanging onto each arm, using their combined weight to hold him back. The attacker was similarly restrained, though they weren't fighting to break free as desperately as Breakker was. They seemed content to stand there, held back by security, watching Breakker's rage with that same cold, distant expression. WWE officials in suits appeared, adding their authority to the situation, making it clear that this had to stop, that it had gone far enough. But Bron Breakker was beyond reason, beyond authority, beyond anything except his need to get his hands on the person who had betrayed him. He broke free from the security members holding him, sending them scattering, and charged again. This time he was met by even more personnel, practically a wall of bodies that finally managed to contain him through sheer numbers. The scene was absolute pandemonium. Officials were shouting orders. Security was struggling to maintain control. The crowd was a seething mass of noise and excitement. The commentators were trying to make sense of what was happening while conveying the magnitude of the revelation. Through it all, the two central figures never broke eye contact, Bron Breakker radiating fury while the attacker remained eerily calm. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few minutes, the situation was brought under some semblance of control. Bron Breakker was being held by at least 8 security members and several officials, still struggling but no longer able to break free. The attacker was being escorted out of the ring, climbing through the ropes while security formed a protective barrier. As they walked up the entrance ramp, they finally showed some emotion, turning back to look at Breakker one more time, and the smallest smile crossed their face. That smile sent Bron Breakker into an even greater frenzy. He roared with rage, the sound barely human, and renewed his efforts to break free with such intensity that he actually managed to shrug off several of the people holding him. It took the entire security team dogpiling on him to keep him from chasing after the attacker, the scene looking more like a rugby scrum than a wrestling show. The attacker disappeared behind the curtain, their exit calm and unhurried despite the violence they were leaving in their wake. The cameras cut back and forth between the chaos in the ring and backstage footage of the attacker walking through the corridors, security scrambling to escort them out of the building. Their expression remained neutral, almost satisfied, as they walked past shocked wrestlers and staff members, everyone staring at them with a mixture of confusion and apprehension. They had accomplished what they set out to do, revealed themselves on their own terms, and left destruction in their wake. Back in the ring, Bron Breakker had finally stopped struggling, but only because he seemed to have exhausted himself. He stood in the center of the ring, surrounded by security and officials, his chest heaving with exertion and emotion. His face was a mask of anguish and rage, sweat dripping from his forehead, his eyes unfocused and staring at nothing. The adrenaline was clearly wearing off, and you could see the emotional weight of the revelation crashing down on him. The crowd was still in shock.